Today we're going to look at 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. And the question I want to pose from these three verses is, what does it mean to lay down your life for your brother? I've heard this question asked, I've heard it discussed, and when people hear this, especially as Christians, maybe newer Christians, when they hear lay down your life for your brother, they may be a little confused because thinking that, is this really part of what being a Christian means, that I have to give up my life for my brother or my sister? But to the Christian, when we hear of laying down our life, we would hope to be the example of Jesus giving his life for us as to be the example that we strive for. Because when we hear that Jesus laid down his life for us, usually the first thing that comes to mind is his crucifixion. Jesus died for us on the cross. That's what laying down your life looks like. And I think John, through his story here in 1 John chapter 3, 16 through 18, is letting us in on a little bit more of the story, a little bit bigger aspect of what it actually means to lay down your life for your brother or your sister. Because in those verses, in verse 17 says, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need and has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Here's where we see the little bit deeper, the little different aspect of laying down your life. If we see somebody has a need and we don't take care of that person, saying, how can the love of God be in us? If Jesus loved us so much that he would go to the cross and give up his life, then why shouldn't we as Christians be willing to love a brother or sister in Christ that much that we could give up some of the things that we have? Because we all have something we can give, not necessarily money, possessions, but time, talents. These are all things that we can give up that a lot of times we hold on to and feel that are precious and dear to us. That is one way to lay down your life. And then John goes on to tell us that, like Jesus, we ought to lay down our lives for others. I mean, there's no surprise in it because he's that example. That's what he did for us. But again, he's not saying that we necessarily have to die for another Christian. He's not saying that we should go out every day looking for that opportunity to die for another Christian. But his example is, again, how to find and help those in need. When we come back to Jesus, the question I could ask is, when did Jesus actually lay down his life? Now, many will say that was immediately, the time he laid down his life was when he hung on the cross. But if we look at the example and the words of verse 17 to say, if we have possessions or if we have wealth, if we have the ability to help somebody and don't help them, I think we can go back in Jesus' life and see examples of times when, before he even made it to the cross, he lived that theory out. That he laid down his life when he raised Lazarus from the dead, because he knew that once he did that there were going to be some upset people over this fact, that plots were going to be made against his life. When he called the tax collector to follow him, he knew the tax collector was a hated person in those days. He knew that there would be consequences for having somebody like this follow him. But he took that step. No matter what the consequences were, he took that step. Those are things in Jesus' life where he laid down his life before he ever made it to the cross. The woman caught in adultery, when he stepped in to defend her from being stoned to death. Again, Jesus would be ridiculed. He would be looked upon in a negative manner. He knew this going in, but yet it was an opportunity to help. And just as verse 17 has said, if we have the ability to do it, then we ought to do it, because through that, it shows the love of God in our lives. So I'll say again that Jesus started laying down his life, and he set examples for us to follow way before he ever made it to the cross. He laid his life down along the way. The ultimate demonstration was in the cross, but the reality is it started way before that. The cross was a natural progression of a life that was already given up for others. So when we're called to lay down our lives for others, don't get all focused on dying for somebody else and never put it into practice for a lack of opportunity. Realize that laying down your life for others is about how you value people more than you value yourself. And we see that on in verse 18 where it says, "Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions in truth and in truth." And we'll see throughout the Bible that when we're given commands, when we're given promises of blessings, rewards, that there's actions required. When we become a Christian doesn't mean that our life stops. When we become a Christian, now our life needs to start taking multiple steps forward. Just as Jesus, through his walk in life, set the examples for us of how to love others, how to meet the needs for others, we need to be doing that on a daily basis. Find somebody around us that, if it's a monetary need, if it's a physical need, whatever it may be, we need to look for those opportunities to help somebody. That is us laying down our life on a daily basis to help others.